Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine finding yourself with just a single piece of source material, right? In this case, it's a transcript from an English-speaking test. And realizing it's this kind of hidden window into, well, fascinating aspects of everyday life. Everything from how we relate to our phones to our ideas about where we actually live.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is just how much insight you can pull from, one person's answers to some pretty common questions. It really is like a mini deep dive into these universal experiences, just seen through one specific lens.
Exactly. So our mission today is to take this transcript where, one person shared their views on things like mobile phone habits, watching movies, being outdoors, politeness in housing, and really try to extract the most interesting nuggets. What do these specific answers tell us, really?
And we're going to cover that whole range, starting with those phone habits, then moving to how they watch movies and enjoy the outdoors.
Right.
We'll touch on their views on politeness and then spend a good chunk of time on housing. That section is particularly rich, isn't it?
It really is. Covers everything from visiting a specific house to contrasting city and countryside living, apartments versus houses.
And even thoughts on buying versus renting and living with parents. Lots to chew on there.
So get ready to compare these perspectives to your own experiences as we go through. It's always a great way to see where you might align or, differ.
Definitely.
Okay, let's dive in. First up, mobile phone habits. The source describes their phone use as, daily, constant. They even use the word addicted, checking it first thing in the morning and last thing at night. That sounds incredibly common, doesn't it?
Oh, it really does. It paints that picture of the phone being totally integrated into the kind of bookends of their day. And when asked about apps, the first ones that came to mind were described as very basic apps. Things like Instagram, InstaShop, which they pointed out is a food delivery service, Amazon, and Google Maps.
So what's interesting there is the mix, right? Social media, shopping and services, and navigation. It really highlights how these devices serve multiple core daily functions, like right out of the gate.
Exactly. Basic needs covered.
But here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The source was asked directly if using phones on public transport is considered a nuisance.
Ah, right. And their answer was pretty clear-cut, wasn't it? A definitive, unequivocal no. They basically said it's completely normal now.
A definitive no.
Yeah.
That's quite a strong stance. They seem to view it simply as a way to stay engaged, just like reading a book or listening to music. It's not really perceived as disruptive.
Yeah. It suggests a real comfort level with that kind of personal screen time in public, something that maybe wasn't the norm, say, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. It's less about potentially distracting others and more about just their own engagement. What does that specific perspective tell you about how we view private devices in public now? Seems like it's just a normalized personal activity within a shared space for them.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's just part of the furniture now. What stands out to you about that specific view? Does it match how you see people using phones on, say, the bus or the train?
It's a good question. Okay, moving from personal devices to more shared experiences. Let's look at movie preferences. The source indicates they don't go to the cinema, not very often. Mentioned the last visit was 2 months ago to watch Barbie.
Right, so 2 months for a big blockbuster like Barbie. It isn't never, obviously, but it does position cinema visits as more of an occasional event, doesn't it, rather than a regular weekly habit for them.
Exactly. And they mentioned ticket costs are quite cheap where they are, maybe $10 for a movie, though prices go up if you select your seat. Now that price point, $10, might surprise some listeners depending on where they live.
Oh, definitely. Cinema prices vary hugely. And as for the viewing experience itself, the preference was watching alone at home, but with company when going to the cinemas.
That split is quite revealing, I think. The comfort and privacy of home for solo watching versus the social aspect being the main draw for actually going out to the cinema. It kind of echoes that theme we just touched on, balancing personal space with shared experiences.
Yeah, that's a good point. It does link back.
Absolutely. Okay, now let's talk about outdoor activities. Is being outdoors enjoyable for the person in the transcript? Seems like a clear yes. They enjoy anything related to outdoors, even just walking.
Simple enjoyment of just being outside, nothing too extreme needed. What's interesting is when they talk about their childhood, they said they wasn't into sports, recalling only playing with friends, which sounds like just, running around.
Right, unstructured play.
Exactly. And cycling, but only because their dad tried to teach them.
That's a very relatable picture of childhood outdoors for many, I think. Often unstructured, more about play and maybe some gentle parental encouragement rather than formal teams or sports.
Yeah, it highlights that enjoying being outside doesn't have to mean you were like a star athlete as a kid. Does that kind of childhood experience resonate with you at all?
It certainly broadens the definition of outdoor activity, doesn't it? Okay, shifting gears slightly, let's look at their perspective on politeness and manners. How do they see themselves?
Well, they would like to think so, describing themselves as very polite on normal days. But then there's that little caveat, unless they are mad about something.
That feels very human, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Acknowledging that, strong emotions can sometimes override our usual behavior.
Totally relatable.
Yeah.
And when asked who taught them politeness, the source puts it down to the way you grow up.
Yeah.
Values from family, watching how parents interact with each other and with the child, and then just noticing, learning, and adapting those behaviors. So it's framed very much as a learned thing, absorbed through observation and your environment.
That makes a lot of sense. It raises an important question for everyone listening. How were you taught politeness? What elements from your own upbringing shaped your understanding of manners?
And how do they handle impoliteness from others? Their main strategy seems to be to avoid interaction.
Yes, exactly. If it's a friend, they mentioned they might actually say something like tell them to lower their voices. But if it's a stranger...
Yeah, if it's a stranger, the approach is to try to avoid getting into any kind of interaction, which suggests a different boundary, right? A different willingness to engage depending on the relationship.
It seems like a pragmatic way to just sidestep potential conflict with strangers.
Yeah.
Makes sense. What do you typically do when someone is impolite? Do you engage or avoid?
It's fascinating how we navigate those social moments, isn't it?
It really is. Okay, now let's really dive into this section on housing and places to live. The transcript provides quite a bit of detail here, starting with a specific anecdote about visiting a friend's house for a barbecue.
Ah, yes. And this friend worked for a real estate company, which maybe gives some context to the kind of house they were visiting. And where is this house located again?
On the Palm.
Right. A location often associated with, well, larger, more luxurious properties. The house itself was a 3-bedroom, described in the source with some pretty strong words. Magnificent, beautiful.
Yeah, they didn't hold back. And they recalled specific details that clearly made it stand out. The first thing noticed right when they walked into the living room was floor-to-ceiling windows with a beautiful view of the Palm. Bedrooms are upstairs.
And the master bedroom obviously made a big impression. It featured a walk-in closet, a balcony, again, with that palm view, and a bathroom with a jacuzzi that was called outstanding.
Wow. And then enjoying a barbecue in the backyard just sort of completed the picture of this ideal home life, maybe.
Sounds like it. Those details, the amazing view, all the light from the windows, the walk-in closet, the jacuzzi, they paint this really vivid picture of what perceived luxury and desirable features look like for this individual.
Definitely. The overall impression they gave was that it was a good place for somebody who wanted to raise kids. It had that beautiful view. Crucially, it was a place the speaker could see myself living in someday. It was aspirational.
Mm-hmm. So thinking about that description, what specific features of that house sound most appealing to you listening? What are your personal must-haves or maybe dream-haves in a home?
It's interesting how specific details can really capture the imagination. Now, connecting this specific visit to the bigger picture, what types of homes did the source say are most popular in their country?
Well, they mentioned growing up in the countryside where mansions or villas were popular. And the reason given was because families tend to live together, multi-generational living, perhaps.
Right. But then there's a contrast drawn with the bigger cities. In cities, apartments are more common and families tend to be more separated. Everybody has their own apartment.
Yeah, and they explicitly contrasted this with the tradition from where they're from, saying, we like to stay together. It really highlights a significant shift, doesn't it? In living arrangements, maybe family dynamics too, as people move to urban centers.
It shows how geography and urbanization can directly impact how families live together or separately. Okay, so when it comes to the choice between a house and an apartment, what were the advantages of a house, according to this source?
Apartments were seen pretty negatively, actually, described as very congested, lacking a backyard or a private place to just relax and be by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And also it being very hard to have a pet in an apartment. Houses, on the other hand, were associated with having a backyard, maybe a terrace, space to walk outside.
And easier for pet ownership.
Yeah.
So given the choice, the preference was clearly a house. The value seems heavily placed on space, privacy, and that direct access to the outdoors.
That desire for personal space, and interestingly, the ease of having pets, that seems to be a strong driver in their preference. Which leads us to another big question, one people debate everywhere. Is it better to buy a property or rent?
And the personal opinion from this source, based on their own experience of buying, was a very firm, yes, it's better to buy.
Yeah, really clear on that. They see buying as investing somewhere and directly compared it to renting, which was viewed as just giving the money to the landlords.
They framed it very much in terms of financial return, didn't they? Monthly payments on a mortgage or loan eventually lead to owning the property, maybe after 5 or 10 years, they said, whereas renting was explicitly called just wasting money.
It's a perspective deeply rooted in that idea of property as a tangible asset, an investment vehicle, perhaps really driven by their own positive personal experience with buying. It makes you wonder, what are the common arguments for buying versus renting where you are? Do they mostly match this perspective, or are other factors like, say, flexibility, maintenance costs, or the huge initial down payment weighted differently?
It's always interesting to hear such a clear articulation of that investment mindset towards housing. Okay, finally, the transcript touches on a really personal and often culturally influenced topic. Is there a right age for people to stop living with their parents?
And the source believes pretty strongly that there's no right age. They emphasize it depends on factors like culture and upbringing.
Right. They shared their own personal example, living alone, because they value my space and I enjoy my freedom. And contrasted this directly with their brother, who lives with their parents, and, in their words, takes care of my parents.
So the conclusion isn't about a specific number, is it? It's about individual needs, cultural context, family responsibilities. It's no right or wrong answer, depending on you at the end of the day.
It really highlights the diverse reasons people might choose to live with or separate from their parents, reasons that go way beyond just hitting a certain age. How do cultural norms about living with parents differ around the world from what you know? And what are your own thoughts on this? It's such a complex decision, influenced by so many personal and societal factors.
It truly is. No single universal answer to that one.
So what does this all mean? We've taken a seemingly simple English-speaking test transcript, and just by digging into the specific answers, we've managed to extract this, well, wealth of perspectives on topics that really affect us all.
Yeah, our relationship with technology, how we find entertainment and enjoyment, our approach to social norms like politeness,
and these deeply personal ideas about family, independence, and the actual spaces we inhabit.
It's just fascinating how much insight into, cultural norms, personal values, and different ways of navigating the world can be revealed just by listening closely to how one person talks about these common experiences.
This deep dive really shows that even in the most ordinary seeming sources, like a conversation transcript, there are these hidden layers of meaning and perspective just waiting to be uncovered if you take the time.
Absolutely.
Which leads to a final, maybe provocative thought for you. Given how much we learned from this one conversation, what other everyday sources, maybe a casual chat you overhear, a social media thread, even just random snippets of conversation might contain surprising insights about the world around us if we just took the time to really listen and, well, unpack them?